What's going on, Duelists? It's your boy Nick, bringing you today on the channel a combo tutorial and test hand video for my recently uploaded Vendread deck profile for the post-January 2024 format. For those of you new to the channel, welcome. My name is Nick. We do Yu-Gi-Oh content mainly focused around rogue and casual decks alike. If that's the kind of Yu-Gi-Oh content that you're interested in, then I highly encourage for you to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any more of my uploads. We are currently working our way to 1,500 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. I do want to apologize. I was supposed to upload this video on this past Sunday. However, I did come down with the stomach flu, and I was pretty much bathroom ridden since. It was a very terrible experience. I do not wish that on anybody. It completely sucked, and I was just in no type of condition to even attempt to record any type of content. But I'm feeling much better now, and I wanted to bring this video out without waiting any longer, as I know a lot of you guys have been asking for these combos who have watched the deck profile. But for those of you who haven't watched the deck profile, it is linked in the description down below, so I encourage for you to check it out. Vendread is one of the more unique archetypes that this game has to offer, being the only zombie ritual theme in the entire game, plus having the really cool mechanic of being able to ritual summon themselves from the graveyard as well as the hand, in addition to their non-ritual monsters granting the ritual monsters inherited effects when the non-rituals are attributed from the field as part of the ritual summon cost, which is obviously very, very cool. Plus, combine that with the fact that they have really awesome looking artwork based around lore from not only Spawn, but Resident Evil as well. I just think that the archetype is very cool. Does it have some downsides and drawbacks? Absolutely. It's not the craziest deck in the world by any means or any stretch of the imagination. It is just a casual slash fun deck. I think a well-experienced pilot could take this deck to like a local setting and probably do pretty well. But anything beyond that, like a regionals or even like a YCS setting, I don't see this deck taking you that far in the grand scheme. That's just my honest opinion. But that doesn't mean that the deck is bad. It just means that it struggles with a couple of things, which I will talk about over the course of the combos and test hands. So I'm going to bring you guys two different combos. Both are going to feature Slayer, opening hand of Slayer. The first one's going to be a Slayer and uni-zombie combo, and then once I'm done with that, we'll go down a Slayer and Diviner combo. But to start things off, let's go down the Slayer uni-zombie line right now. And this is just going to be a 2-card opening hand, just for you to see, what you can do with a 2-card line. I guess we can talk about, before we actually get into the combos, my biggest gripe with Vendread is the fact that there isn't any Vendread monsters that are actual starters. Now, that might sound kind of crazy to you, especially when you read some of the cards, but it makes sense once you play the deck long enough and you understand. Like, there should have been a Vendread that, like, upon normal summon, for example, just searched you like a ritual spell, or just something to, like, increase the deck's consistency, because there really isn't a lot of searchability in the theme, and that's my biggest gripe. Outside of Slayer's Graveyard effect, you don't have a lot of ways to continue playing or push through any type of, like, real disruption. And that's kind of what, like, drags the deck down, in my honest opinion. So you are stuck with relying on a lot of, like, generic outside support, which isn't bad, but it just means that it sucks when you don't open the generic outside support and you're strictly stuck with just the Vendread hands where you have nothing but Vendread cards, and you can only go so far in those particular situations. So with that being said, let's not waste any more time. We're going to start off with this 2-card line. So let's go ahead and normal summon uni-zombie, activate his effect to target himself and increase his level by 1, and send a zombie monster from the deck to the graveyard, of which we'll be sending our copy of Scar the Vendread. Scar, when sent to the graveyard, allows you to search for a Vendread spell trap from deck to hand, and we're going to use his effect to grab ourselves a Revendread evolution here. Now, Scar the Vendread is one of the newer Vendreads that came out of Power the Elements. Really cool card. They definitely needed a searcher for their spells and traps. My issue with Scar is, again, the fact that Scar, like, while they needed a spell trap searcher, in my opinion, they didn't need it on a level 6 body. Because, again, think about this. If you open the Scar doesn't have a way to get himself to the graveyard from your hand. You need to rely on other cards to do that. And that's not always going to be the case, depending on how your hand looks. You're not always going to be able to pitch the Scar, from your hand to grave to be able to trigger that effect. And this is why playing multiples of, like, cards like Scar or any of the non-ritual Vendreads for that matter winds up being very bad in my opinion and really bricky. And that's the biggest mistake, the number one mistake I see a lot of other people who do Vendread profiles make, is that they play simply too many of the non-rituals. They're, in the grand scheme, they're really not that great. You really just need one-ofs of all these guys. And again, this kind of just proves that point, because while Scar is probably the best non-ritual in the deck, he still sucks because, like, when you open cards like this, you don't really have any good ways of getting him to graveyard unless the rest of your hand is capable of doing that, which is a bit of a problem, obviously. Combine that with the fact that he's also a hard once per turn on both of his effects. That just makes having duplicates of him kind of redundant in a lot of scenarios, especially since his secondary effect can just revive himself from grave anyway, so you can always constantly put him back in the graveyard from the field to keep triggering that spell trap search on every consecutive turn. So anyway, we're using him to search the Vendread evolution. Now, before we go any further here, we're actually going to use uni-zombie's first effect now, targeting himself, pitching our Slayer out of our hand to increase the uni-zombie's level again. Keep in mind, he started off as a 3, he turned into a level 4 when we sent Scar, now he's going to be a level 5 after we pitch the Slayer. Now, the reason why we do this is because evolution, when you use this card, it not only allows you to tribute monsters from your hand or field, but you can also send Vendread monsters from your deck to the graveyard as part of the ritual cost, but the levels of all the monsters have to equal the level of the ritual you intend to summon. So that's why we had to get our uni-zombie up an additional level, because we needed him to be level 5, because we want to use evolution to be able to send one of our level 1 Vendreads from our deck to grave as part of the ritual cost. So we're going to go ahead and activate evolution. Now, I know a lot of people talk about this card and they say it's bad because the ritual monster, you know, gets destroyed during the end phase of the next turn. You have to understand that this card isn't designed to, like, be a ritual spell that you use to summon a monster and it sticks. It's more designed as a stepping stone so you can climb into bigger and better things. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people tend to miss with this deck, because I've seen so many Vendread profiles choose not to run this, or they just play this card as a one-off. This card is actually very good once you understand how it's supposed to work. And in my particular list, we only played as a 2-of, and it's only because it is a hard once per turn, so having too many copies of this can be bricky, because if you open duplicates, you can't use them like you can with Origin, which is their other ritual spell that doesn't have a once per turn clause. But anyway, hopefully that all makes sense, and I'm explaining everything in such a way that, you know, isn't confusing anybody. So we're going to send Anima from our deck to grave with evolution, and then tribute our level 5 uni-zombie. 1 and 5 make 6, so that allows us to ritual summon our Slayer from the graveyard, which is again why it doesn't matter that we pitch it off uni-zombie's first effect, because Vendreads can be ritual summoned from the grave, just as like they can from the hand, which is pretty cool. Now, since a monster was tributed from the field, that does trigger the graveyard effect of our Scar. So we're going to use its effect to banish one other zombie monster from our graveyard, which will be uni-zombie, and we'll go ahead and special summon the Scar of the Vendread from our grave. Now, we are locked into Vendreads while the Scar summoned from grave is on the field, but that's really not a problem, because now we can just use link it off with our Add Vendread Savior, which is their in-archetype link monster. Linking both the Scar and the Slayer off to make our link, which procs our Slayer's graveyard effect, which is pretty much the bread and butter of the whole theme. Slayer's grave effect is so important to this deck. If this ritual summon card is sent to the graveyard, you can add a ritual spell from the deck to your hand, and if you do, send a Vendread monster from your deck to the graveyard. This graveyard effect is basically how the deck continues grinding and how it keeps playing. And it generates so much advantage for this deck, which is really, really strong. So you definitely want to do everything you can to abuse that graveyard effect as much as possible. It is unfortunate because it is a hard once, but that's really okay. It's not that much of a gripe as opposed to some of the other gripes I have with the deck. So off of Slayer's grave effect, we're going to use search a ritual spell. That's going to be our Ravenous Vendread, which is the other ritual spell they have that came out of Power of the Elements. And then we're going to use the other effect to send our copy of Hound Horde from our deck to the graveyard. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to use our Hound Horde effect. It says you can discard a Vendread card to special summon this card from the graveyard, but banish it when it leaves the field. So we're going to discard our Ravenous Vendread, but then we're going to use our Add Vendread Savior's effect to target a Vendread card in our graveyard and add it to our hand once per turn. So we're going to add the Ravenous that we just pitched for our Hound Horde back to hand, effectively making the cost we paid for Hound Horde free. Now what we're going to do is we're going to activate the Ravenous, which allows us to special summon a Vendread from our hand, deck, or graveyard in face-down defense position, and then we can ritual summon any Vendread ritual from our hand or grave using monsters we control, including the monster summoned by its first effect. So we're going to special summon our Revenants from our deck in face down defense, and then tribute both our Hound Horde, which does get banished by its own effect, and our Revenants, which will just go to the grave, to special summon our Slayer from our graveyard as the ritual summon. Which means that because we use Hound Horde on field and Revenants on field as part of the ritual material, the Slayer that we summoned now gets both of their inherited bullet point effects, which is Revenant's effect is once per turn as a quick effect, the Slayer can now target special summon monsters and banish them, and then Hound Horde is once per turn as a quick effect, you can target spells and traps, and you can target a spell trap your opponent controls and banish it as well. So our Slayer having the ability to banish special summon monsters and banish spells and traps as quick effects makes him quite formidable, in my opinion. That's just off of a 2-card line, which we just started with uni-zombie and a Slayer. And we do have pretty good follow-up because we do have the Animal Engrave to banish next turn to revive or banish Hound Horde. Plus we still have the Scar, and then if Vendread Savior does survive, we can use his recursion effect next turn as well to keep adding back resources to our hand, which is obviously very, very good. So like I said, that is our just a 2-card combo that ends on 2 cards on field, but you do have a very powerful Link monster and a very sticky ritual monster that can, banish special summon stuff and banish spells and traps, which I think is very cool. So that was the first combo. Now we're going to jump to our second combo, which does feature Slayer, but this time instead of opening with Slayer and uni-zombie, we're going to have Slayer plus Diviner of the Herald, which Diviner the Herald I think is gives the combo a higher ceiling as opposed to the uni-zombie line. And that's why if I open hands that have Diviner and a uni-zombie, I'm still normally sticking to the normal summon of Diviner over the uni-zombie in most cases, just because Diviner does give you that higher ceiling. But it really just depends on how the hand looks and what you're facing on the board at any given time. So this next combo is going to be Diviner plus Slayer. We're going to go ahead and normal summon out our Diviner, activate the Diviner effect, sending a fairy monster from our deck or extra deck to grave. In this case, we'll send our Herald of the Arclight from the extra deck to our graveyard, which will proc its graveyard effect to allow us to search for a ritual spell or a ritual monster. In this case, since we already have a ritual monster in our hand, we're just going to grab a ritual spell, which will be our copy of Vendread Origin. Now, keep in mind that the Diviner's level, she gains... Her level's increased by the level of the card that was sent. So in this case, since Herald is level 4, Diviner was 2, her level becomes 6, which means that she can be treated as the entire requirement for a ritual summon of a Slayer. So now that we're going to use our Origin, tributing our Diviner from the field to go ahead and ritual summon our Slayer from our hand. Because our Diviner was tributed, we can proc her secondary effect, which states if this card is tributed, we can special summon a level 2 or lower fairy monster from our hand or deck except herself. Now we do play a target for that, and that's going to be our Ret Time Reviver Emitter. Hopefully I don't butcher that name, it's a little weird in my opinion. But that's the card that we play. It is a level 2 Dark Fairy Tuner, so we can special that off the Diviner since she was tributed. Now, because Reviver is a tuner and Slayer is a non-tuner, we can actually Synchro Summon here for a 8, which can be a copy of our Excel Synchro Stardust. Since we put a Ritual Summon Slayer to our graveyard, it will trigger Slayer's graveyard effect, but we can chain block it with the XL Synchro Stardust effect on summon to target a level 2 or lower tuner in grave and special summon it to insulate our Slayer's grave effect from things like Ash and other stuff like that. So we can go XL effect to revive a level 2 or lower tuner, and then we can go Slayer's graveyard effect to search for a ritual spell and then send a Vendread monster from our deck to the graveyard. And we're pretty much going to go down the same line, or a similar line, I should say, as the uni-zombie combo. We're going to grab Vendread Evolution here, and then we're going to send a copy of Hound Horde from our deck to the graveyard, off the graveyard effect of our Slayer. Now, before we go any further, we're going to Synchro Climb again, using our Stardust and the level 2 tuner to make our Bestial Dispater. And this is why I was saying that the Diviner line gives you a much higher ceiling, because you're able to add a Dispater to the board in addition to what else, to the rest of the stuff we're going to be doing. We'll go Evolution here. Remember, the Evolution allows you to ritual summon from any Vendread ritual from hand or graveyard, but not only tributing monsters from hand or field, but also sending Vendread monsters from deck to grave as well. So it's pretty much like a free Foolish Burial. So we'll send our Scar of the Vendread directly from our deck to the graveyard to go ahead and ritual summon out our Slayer again from our graveyard, proccing the Scars effect engraved to search for a Vendread spell trap, of which we will be grabbing ourselves a copy of Ravenous Vendread. And this kind of like goes back to what I was saying, like these combos are not that linear or easy, and this is why I feel like a lot of people struggle with this deck and why I keep seeing profiles that just aren't that great, because the deck is really hard to play. You know, like these combos aren't the easiest things to pick up and learn. And like, as you can see how this deck works, it's more of like a combo deck, really. It's not really a control deck like a lot of people think it is. But yeah, hopefully, like I said, you guys are, you know, this helps you guys understand how the deck should be piloted. Now what we're going to do here is we're going to use our Hound Horde Graveyard effect, discarding a Vendread card in our hand to special summon itself, but banish it when it leaves the field. Now we're going to link our Slayer and our Hound Horde off. Keep in mind the Hound Horde does get banished because it was summoned off of its own effect to make our Add Vendread Savior. Then we're going to use our Bestial Dispater to bring back our banished Hound Horde back to our side of the field as a special summon. We'll use our Add Vendread Savior effect, targeting our Ravenous Vendread engraved to add it to our hand. And now we can activate our Ravenous Vendread, allowing us to special summon a Vendread from our hand, deck, or graveyard in face-down defense position, and then ritual summoning a Vendread ritual from our hand or graveyard by using monsters we control, including the monster special summoned by Ravenous's first effect. So we will special summon a Revenants from deck, tributing both the Hound Horde and the Revenants to ritual summon our Slayer for the third time this turn out of our graveyard. And because we used because we use Revenants and Hound Horde on the field, our Slayer does inherit their additional effects. So our Slayer, again, can quick effect banish special summon monsters and quick effect banish opponents' spells and traps once per turn each, which is very strong. And then since a monster was tributed on our field, that does trigger the graveyard effect of our Scar of Vendread, allowing us to banish one other zombie from our grave. In this case, we'll banish the Revenants to special summon out our Scar. And now you can kind of see what I was talking about, where the Diviner line just gives you that higher ceiling, because with the uni-zombie line, we just had a Slayer and Add Vendread. But now with the Diviner line, we have the Slayer, Add Vendread, plus the Dispater and the additional body off of the Scar. Keep in mind you are Vendread locked while this is on the field, but again, that's really a non-issue, because we could always just link it off next turn for another Add Vendread Savior. But we do put a monster in the banish zone, which makes our Dispater live. And since our Slayer can banish special summon monsters and spells and traps, that means that we can banish, obviously, our opponent's stuff, which gives our Dispater more utility as to what he can banish, or as to what he can negate or not, which is obviously very strong. So those are just two combos I wanted to show you guys, utilizing Slayer in any like starter, whether that's Diviner or uni-zombie. Now, before we wrap this up, I want to do a quick test hand for you guys, so that way you guys can actually see what the deck plays like on the draw. But hopefully you guys are enjoying the content. Like I said, my apologies for the delay. I just wasn't feeling well. But I'm much better now, and I'm definitely going to be back at it in the lab, cooking up stuff for you guys, especially now that we are on the cusp of the release of Phantom Nightmare. I have a ton of stuff for you guys. You guys are going to flip. So many updates that are going to be coming for different deck profiles that I have done before, plus brand new stuff that hasn't even been seen on the channel, similar to the Vendread deck list here that, you know, I just dropped out of the blue. Vendread is something that I haven't featured on the channel previously, but it's a deck that I've always wanted to do for the channel, just because it's one of my more decks that I'm more fond of, just because of the art style and the lore that it has. I just think it's cool. I wish the deck was honestly a bit better, but you know, you can't have it all, I guess. It's still a fun deck at the end of the day to either, you know, like I said, bring to your locals or just play amongst your friends. But anything beyond that is definitely kind of at your own risk kind of thing. So went ahead and pile shuffled, and now we're just, you know, kind of getting the card shuffled up so you guys don't think I'm cheating. Gonna go ahead and cut, and we're gonna draw a 5-card opening hand, and we're gonna see what we hit off the top. Forbidden Droplet, Revendread Origin, Vendread Scavenger, Revendread Evolution, and a Zombie World. So this hand is interesting. Opening Zombie World is nice because it's just a soft floodgate that a lot of decks actually can't really play through. Especially decks like Fire King. Fire King really loses hard to Zombie World because they can't actually use some of their revival effects. Things like the Arvada, the level 4 elephant looking guy. Can't special summon any fire beast before a wing beast engrave because they're all zombies engrave. So it does kind of hinder their strategy a bit, which I think is pretty cool. So we'll go ahead and start off by activating Zombie World with this particular hand. And now at this point, what we can do here is we can probably just go Vendread Evolution, sending our Executor from our deck to the graveyard to go ahead and ritual summon our Scavenger here. Now Scavenger will get destroyed at the end of the next turn by the restriction of Evolution. But that's pretty much all we can do with that particular hand. We can set the droplet and pretty much pass. I mean, we still have Origin. We could use Origin to like tribute the Scavenger and go ahead and summon Executor. Which I guess yeah, honestly that might not be that bad of a play. I guess, yeah, we might as well do that. Tribute our Scavenger, go ahead and summon out our Executor as a ritual summon. Since again we can ritual summon from the graveyard. And now since Scavenger was properly summoned, ritual summoned, we can actually use a secondary effect that states, if this card is in the graveyard and we control Slayer, keep in mind that Executor's name becomes Slayer while he's on the field. We can actually use our Scavenger's graveyard effect to special summon it, but banish it when it does leave the field. So now we have just two big bodies on board. Executor on field that helps insulate our field from targeting. Our opponent cannot target cards we control except for the Executor, and their Zombie World lock. Plus we also have the droplet in the back row, and we have the Origin engrave to protect our Slayer, in this case being Executor, from destruction by battle or card effect, which is pretty cool. So like I said, not the greatest opening, but still decent enough for a deck this caliber, in my opinion. I mean, you basically have 5,800 damage on board, targeting protection, a floodgate, and another negate through droplet, which is pretty cool. So, and then if they do out the Executor, he does float into any Vendread card from deck to hand, which is pretty cool. Let's run that back one more time before wrapping it up, just so you guys again can get another feel for what the deck plays like. I'll repile shuffle again on the camera. But like I said, hopefully you guys are enjoying the content. Like I said, like and subscribe if you made it this far into the video and you're not subbed to the channel. Subscribe. All it does is benefit the channel in the long run. It's going to continue helping me to bring you guys amazing content. So, I do a lot of stuff on this channel that most other YouTubers don't necessarily cover. I think a lot of, people tend to focus more on the meta relevant aspects of Yu-Gi-Oh! But in my opinion, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has so many other decks that just don't receive a lot of love or attention from a lot of the bigger content base. Because, that's just things that people won't really focus on, like Vendread, for example. But it's still such a cool deck, and I think a lot of people, want to know more about the off-the-wall stuff that this game has to offer, because there are a lot of hidden gems, honestly, in this game, like Vendread, for example. And I just want to bring you guys a lot of stuff that I think most people won't really focus much on. So hopefully you guys enjoy that kind of style of content. But that's why I'm here to bring you guys the sauce. So let's go ahead and reopen another hand. So we got Core, Revolution, Uni-zombie, Vendread Origin, and a Mizuki. Now this is a hand. So let's see how we want to go about this. We're going to go ahead and normal summon our Uni-zombie as our starter of choice. Activate its effect, targeting itself, to go ahead and Foolish a zombie monster from our deck to the graveyard. We most likely want to Foolish a ritual here because we want to be able to get access to our, Slayers and whatnot. It's just a matter of what we want to send. Well, obviously, we're sending Slayer, but a matter of how we want to go about the combo. So let's dump a Slayer off the Uni-zombie. Remember, Uni-zombie's level does increase by 1 in this particular instance. Now what we can do here is, let's go ahead and activate. You know what? Before we do anything, let's use Uni-zombie's other effect, targeting itself and then discarding a card from our hand. Let's get the Core out of our hand preemptively so we can just get that into the graveyard as an extension. So now our Uni-zombie's level 5, actually. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go Origin. We're going to tribute our Uni-zombie from field and our Mizuki from the hand. And that's going to allow us to ritual summon our Slayer from our graveyard. Okay, hopefully everyone's following me here. Now what we can do is we can go I guess we can go Mizuki effect. Banish the Mizuki to revive our uni-zombie. And now we can go for a link play into our Add Vendread Savior by linking off the uni-zombie and the Slayer, triggering the Slayer's graveyard effect, which is the bread and butter, allowing us to search for a ritual spell from deck to hand, and then sending a Vendread monster from deck to grave. We could probably grab an evolution here off the Slayer, and then we can probably send... Guess we can just send our Hound Horde. If I could find it. Actually, here, you know what we'll do? We'll send Striges. Because we haven't really done a Striges combo here. Striges is interesting. When it's sent to the graveyard, you can reveal a Vendread card in your hand and then immediately special summon it. So we can reveal the evolution that we searched and then just special the Striges. It does get banished when it leaves the field, but it's really a non-issue in this case. Now what we can do is we can go evolution here. That's going to send our Scar the Vendread from our deck to the graveyard to allow us to ritual summon our Slayer from the grave. Then that will trigger Scar's effect to search for a Vendread spell trap, which can be our copy of Ravenous Vendread. You can kind of see how we're getting all the pieces of the puzzle together slowly but surely. Now what we can do is we can go Core's graveyard effect. We can banish one other zombie from grave to special summon out the Core. And then... we can go Add Vendread effect to add back our Origin. And then we can just go ahead and do some quick link climbing here. Go ahead into like a... Actually here, well, we don't even have to do that. You can just go into a Vampire Sucker, honestly, using Add Vendread and the Slayer on the field that we've ritual summoned already twice. So make a Vampire Sucker here in this case. And now what we can do is we can go ahead and go Ravenous Vendread. Special summoning from our deck. In this case, let's see, what do we want? Yeah, that is legal. So let's go Ravenous. I'm sorry, I'm just counting for the Pebble rule in Yu-Gi-Oh! Vendread is one of those decks that suffers from the Pebble rule pretty badly because of all their different level changing gimmicks and whatnot. The Pebble rule is just an unspoken rule in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you cannot overpay for a ritual summon. Even though most ritual spells state that you can, tribute monsters whose levels equal or exceed, that doesn't mean that you can just overpay for the summon by using additional monsters that you otherwise aren't able to use, which a lot of players don't actually know. So we're going to use Ravenous Vendread here, special summoning a Revenants from our deck and face down defense, and that will allow us to ritual summon our Slayer from grave, using our Revenants from the field, our Core from the field, and our Striges from the field. Both Core and Striges do get banished because of their restrictions. But now we ritual summon a Slayer using Revenants, a Striges, and a Core on board, which means our Slayer cannot be targeted by card effects. After damage calculation, if he battles a monster, we get to draw a card and then discard a card. And then because we use Revenants, the Slayer can also now, quick effect, banish a special summon monster once per turn, which is obviously very crazy. And then because the Slayer was ritual summoned from the graveyard and is treated as a special summon, that does trigger our Vampire Sucker to get us a free draw, which we do draw into an Anima, which is pretty nice. But that's pretty much, like I said, going to wrap up our Vendread stuff. We can just go ahead and set our copy of Evolution here, or Revolution, excuse me. And then go ahead and, like I said, pass turn. I mean, we have a pretty beefy Slayer. Can't be targeted, banishes special summon monsters, and then we get advantage when he battles into monsters, allowing us to draw and discard. Plus we have the Sucker effect, allowing us to get a lot of advantage. We got 4 banished zombies already, which means we're pretty much just 1 zombie away from utilizing our graveyard effect of our Revolution. On the opponent's turn, though, we can use its on-field effect, discarding a card from our hand, which could be our Anima. We can target a Vendread monster and a ritual spell engrave. Special summon the monster in defense, and then add the ritual spell to our hand, so we can go like special revenants in defense, and then add ourselves like the ravenous to our hand during the opponent's turn, putting the revolution engrave. And then, like I said, we're pretty much a hop, skip, and a jump from using Revolution's Graveyard effect to shuffle 5 banished zombies back and getting a free draw. But that's going to wrap up the combos and test hands, guys. Sorry, I know the video was a bit long, but Vendread is one of those decks that, you know, there's so many different combos and different lines you could have taken. It definitely does take a lot of more explaining to go over. That way it makes sense. But that's going to wrap up the combos and test hands for the deck, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Like I said, link in the description down below for the deck profile. And like I said, this is going to be Nick hitting that end phase. Stay tuned for more awesome content coming your way. Peace.